Now, I am not known for my one-sidedness. I apparently have this annoying habit of taking every good thing that there is and trying to dismantle it from a bad perspective, and apparently people that I know personally hate this. Look, I just don't like simple statements. Everything is always more complicated than that. As a result, I do believe that my opinions are at least somewhat nuanced, although let's be fair here for a second, pretty much everyone likes to believe this about themselves. But there is one thing that I can get behind without any reservations whatsoever. Banks are fucking evil. It's true, on an institutional level, banks are just, by the very nature of their existence, evil. Think about all the terrible things that happen in the world, all of the terrible things that are being caused by people, all of the terrible things that are not being caused by people, and where we could easily do something against them, but we don't. All of the massive array of systemic issues, which just clearly, on the face of it, very simply only serve the profit motive. The suffering caused among the most vulnerable of society, the havoc wreaked on the environment that future generations will suffer under even more immensely. There are a lot of very powerful interest groups that spend a lot of money to keep all of those things going, but the one thing that connects all of these, and which beyond that further causes unspeakable evil of its own, is banking. Banks constantly lobby politicians to deregulate financial markets so they can steal, straight up steal, your savings. Banks actively ruin businesses and the lives of everyone who works at them in order to make a quick buck, often by using illegal market tactics for which they never have to pay anything because they just get away with it. They have created an ever snowballing system of debt by which they have some measure of control over every single industry that exists. The whole point of this, by the way, is to maintain a kind of unsustainable growth that will just ruin future generations even more than they are already ruined, and ruin just regular people right this very day. Because the only thing that this debt is used to invest in is to just literally make more money for people who are already unfathomably rich. That's like all it does. Especially if you are American. The reason that everything in life seems to be designed to put you in debt and then trap you in that debt is because banks want it that way. You would think that banks would be very happy if you pay back a debt that you have with them. But have you ever actually tried doing that, especially when it's like a big amount of money? They hate it. They will try to stop you at every opportunity, try to trap you in new debt because they understand that their entire business model depends on you never getting out of debt. This is why they have infinite fees for everything and absurd interest rates. Banks have actively created every single financial crisis in modern history, and they have also benefited off every single financial crisis in modern history that they created, because they knew exactly what they were doing. You know the financial crisis of 2008, where big banks actively sold bullshit subprime mortgage packages in order to just make a little bit more money by investing, gambling money really, on this extremely unstable financial instrument that they knew was unstable, because otherwise they wouldn't have bought the rating agencies to make up bullshit ratings. They destroyed every single bit of economic opportunity around you and then used your taxpayer dollars to get themselves bailed out. Do you know how many people killed themselves over 2008? Do you know how few bankers? Because none of them have ever even been prosecuted for any of the shit they did that was highly illegal. At least when they caused the huge financial crash in the early 20th century that pretty much directly led to the rise of the Nazis and the Holocaust, they had the kindness and decorum to take the 30th story window out when they went to get cigarettes. The whole Wall Street bets thing that happened, where they just like this on a dime in a day changed the rules of the financial market to benefit them so they could steal money from small investors that were fucking with their profits for the gain of the little man. That's a tiny blip on the radar of the true evil that banks do. Sometimes I really think that all bankers should just be
given a stern talking to by an adult and sent to bed early without dessert.
But what am I even saying? Anyone who isn't completely brainwashed agrees with me on this. Saying banks are evil is like saying politicians are corrupt. It's almost a non-statement at this point. The best you can hope for as a response from the average person that it will elicit is a shrug and a nod and a, well, yeah, but like, I mean, sure, what are you gonna do about it though? And you know what? They're kind of right. Having specialized institutions that keep people's money safe is a good thing for a society. And also being able to start or expand your business by going to such institutions to take out a loan is a very good thing for anyone who doesn't have just an immensely rich family that is willing to just gift them vast amounts of cash. Banks provide a number of essential services without which a modern society simply cannot function. They're a huge evil, of course, but unfortunately, they are also a necessary evil. Or are they? I mean, you've read the title of the video, you know that no, they're not. They just pay a lot of money to make you think that they're necessary. Now, chances are that at some point in your life, you've heard the term credit union. And you might even be aware vaguely of what that is, but like, you're not entirely sure what the difference really is to a bank? Which, I mean, to be fair, for you as a client, as just a private person who wants to use banking services, there's not actually that much of a difference. The services that they offer are largely the same, it's just the way that they perform the services that is different. Now, just to make this clear, every credit union has a different way of operating, every credit union is different, much like every bank is different from every other bank. These are just general statements that apply to pretty much all credit unions, or just literally all credit unions because they're essential to what a credit union even is. The main big thing that distinguishes banks and credit unions, the one thing that really defines what a credit union is that where banks are owned by rich investors who sit at the top of the pyramid, a credit union is owned by its members. Also in the United States, credit unions count as not-for-profit organizations, which are somehow different from charity organizations because they do actually generate profits for their members. It's just like US law bureaucracy that I'm not going to get into. This means that a credit union does not technically have customers, it only has members, which is what you become when you create an account at the credit union. You put your money in there, you become a member of the credit union, and you get to vote in whatever internal control structure that they have. At the bank, of course, only the rich people who own the bank get to vote, not you. To become a member of a credit union, you usually have to be a member of a specific group of people, much like professional mutual societies. This can be that you have to work in a certain field, you have to belong to a certain religion, you have to be a veteran, but the most common requirement for credit unions is that you have to live in a certain area. Which makes sense when you consider that the concept of the credit union originated in the mid-1800s in rural Germany, when people realized that they needed modern banking services in order to be able to work with the rest of the world and not get left behind by the cities, but none of the big banks actually wanted to open any branches there because it wouldn't have been profitable. Now, as a bit of a caveat, the whole membership thing works differently in Germany than it does in the US. Oh, it doesn't really, but there is an additional component to it. So pretty much all of my banking services are handled by a credit union, but I am not a member of that credit union. I am a customer of the credit union, which I know I said technically doesn't happen, but it can be done, and it's actually common practice in Germany where most private persons have their checking accounts with credit unions. And the reason is, like, basically I have not bothered to become a member. Also, I don't really have the money for it. It's for a middle class person, it's a negligible amount that you need to put in there as like a fixture. But for me, it's not that much. So I can benefit from all of the things that a credit union does, for most of them at least, while still being a customer. And I used to be with a different credit union because I lived in a different area, and it was just extremely easy to switch over my accounts. I told them here, hey, I have moved, please switch the accounts, and they did it. No fuss. Because credit unions are fundamentally community-oriented. Of course, they want to keep the savings of their members and customers safe and grow the savings of their members and customers, but the profit motive is not the fundamental end-all be-all. It's not the highest of goals. And yet somehow they manage to offer better interest rates across the board. Now, the reason for this is of course simple. When a bank makes huge profit, that is kicked up to its billionaire investors. When a credit union makes profit, it's kicked up to all of the members. They usually have lower fees than banks, or no fees at all. I don't think my bank has any fees that I've run into, except for like things where it's actually reasonable to demand some sort of fee. And they have way better and more personal customer service because that's kind of what it means to be community-oriented. They tend to charge less interest on loans that they give out, which of course is something that they do. They just don't do it by creating money out of nothing, the way that big banks do. This makes them especially popular with small business, where they will actually take the time to work out a proper strategy that is optimal for that particular business, which is why they have an 80% satisfaction rate with small businesses. Imagine having an 80% satisfaction rate as a moneylender. Even though they very much do not account for half of the American banking sector, they do account for half of the American small business loans. And after 2008, they've basically like doubled their small business investments. Because the thing is, very few credit unions failed in the 2008 financial crisis. They all took a hit, of course, and some of them did fail because the fucking economy crashed. Everyone took a hit, but generally speaking, the savings of their members and their own savings, because they didn't engage in the same kind of like insane, volatile, and unethical speculative practices that big banks just do every single day, their savings were protected. In fact, big banks had a 250% higher failure rate than credit unions in that crisis. And while they cut back on their small business lending as it being, too dangerous, credit unions doubled down and made money. Now, something you may have heard is that if a credit union does fail, you are well and truly fucked, because they do not have FDIC insurance of up to $250,000. And this is true, because instead they have National Credit Union Association insurance to the exact same amount. There is literally no difference to you as a person. So better service, cheaper loans, better interest rates, more stability, democratic control, and community focus. This all sounds very good. It sounds like maybe it's a bit too good to be true. So where is the downside? Well, there are, in fact, several downsides. The biggest downside is coverage, right? Because most credit unions are regional, you will have to pay fees if you're trying to withdraw money at ATMs that do not belong to the credit union, which is pretty much most ATMs outside of that region. And let me tell you, big commercial banks love to fuck over customers of credit unions whenever they can get away with it. Here's the thing though, right? I was very surprised to find this out because I've never had a problem with it. You see, credit unions are not really in competition with each other the way that banks are. A commercial bank has a vested interest in making sure that you do not withdraw money from another bank's ATM machine. Credit unions, on the other hand, love to team up. They are, by their very nature, limited to one specific pool of clients, and they have no intention of going beyond that, and they share the common philosophy of being community-oriented ventures. So they will form these huge networks where you can withdraw money at ATM machines owned by other credit unions and very rarely also commercial banks. In the US, this coverage cannot compete with the coverage of commercial banks, but for instance in Germany, it absolutely can. And especially to the extent where if you're in a rural area, if you're not very lucky, probably the only ATM machine in town is gonna be the local credit union's ATM machine. And because many of these credit union networks like to share the same name, like for instance Sparkasse or Volksbank here in Germany, they're very easy to identify. The other big drawback is technology. Big banks have just huge teams dedicated at all hours of the day to providing high-end online banking services to their customers. Ultimately, this translates into like the online banking website that you have for a big bank. It's gonna look better than the online banking website of your local credit union. That's really all it boils down to. Not to mention, if you have a problem with the website, someone at the credit union, you can phone them up and they will have someone on the line with you within minutes because customer service is one of the key areas of their entire business model. Now, in terms of online security, there was a time when credit unions had a bit of a problematic reputation. But this is no longer the case because, you know, they team up, they have access to the exact same kind of security systems that big banks do, except of course for the proprietary ones that the individual big banks keep to themselves, but they also don't share them among the other commercial banks. And credit unions are much less likely to be targeted for like having money stolen from them because they handle much less money than big banks do. Now, to be fair, there are some other drawbacks to credit unions that you should probably consider. They probably will not help you move millions and billions of dollars to offshore tax havens because they just don't have those kinds of contacts and they do have ethical concerns. They will not help you engage in large-scale money laundering for your international drug cartel. That's also a thing that if that's something that you want from a bank, as a customer and a client, they're not going to be able to provide that for you. They cannot be used by, say, you're a billionaire investor watching this video. They're not going to allow you to use the money that people put into their banking services to be gambled away at extremely high-risk stock market bets. You can probably see by this point why the rich and powerful do not like credit unions at all, and why they spend so much effort to making sure you do not know what a credit union is, and why it is just superior to commercial banks in every way possible. Unless, of course, you're in like the top 0.001% of society in terms of the money that you have, in which case the commercial bank is probably going to be a better option for you. Credit unions can do all of the same things for the average person that a commercial bank can do, but they can do them better. They can do them oriented towards you. They can do them in a way that actually benefits their members. And this is why I will never entrust my money to any financial institution that isn't a credit union, and I highly encourage you to do the same. Ditch commercial banks. All they will do is try to steal your money, and credit unions will always act in your best interest because that is what they are designed on an institutional level to do. Unless you enjoy being a serf to like a shadowy cabal of billionaires, which may well be, I'm not trying to kink shame here, but unless you're one of those people, there is no reason not to make the switch to a credit union. Thank you very much for watching this video. Like, comment, subscribe, share this to your relevant communities, but do not spam them. Consider supporting me on Patreon or subscribe, start buying some of my merchandise or my short story collection. And in that spirit, you might have noticed the lighting change at some point during the filming of the video, and that's because there was just like a massive amount of snow outside. And now I'm looking outside, the sun is shining, everything's green. Fucking... Oh god, I love April. And see you around, cunts.